Honestly, you come all this way from England and this is what happens. No, anyway. You can't hear it, but a couple of years ago, these very nice people over in Tokyo recorded the DKC 2 suite, which was very nice. So imagine that you can hear it.
So I haven't tried mine yet. I've got graphics and you can't see it. So,
yeah, so we'll try that. Anyway, so with me here is Mr. Kevin Bayliss.
Just want to say, anybody that came to the gig last night and watched us on stage, thank you very much. Yeah, awesome audience, so thanks very much.
And for anybody who doesn't know, which is probably just one person at the back, Kevin did most of the 3D modelling for the DKC series, also for Killer Instinct and Battletoads, and many, many more. So rather than just do the talk on audio, which is all very nice, but we thought, because we worked together for the last 200 years, we thought we'd do a talk that included graphics as well. So without further ado, I will find the stuff that I was going to talk about, because this isn't working. So 2 minutes. Talk among yourselves. Yes, we are playing tonight in the Belvedere Bar, and I believe it's at 7:30 time, so make sure you're all there. So that's just a bit of shameless self-promotion.
Also, we've got... Sorry?
Yeah, we are tonight, yeah. Absolutely.
We've also got... I'll just clear this up while we've got time to. We've got a very limited number of T-shirts for the Salamandos project. There's about 20 of them, and that's all. We've got about 100 posters. We'll be giving some of those away and selling a lot of those if anyone would like to make a donation to us for our beer fund. The donation goes out at about $5 per poster.
Yeah.
That's right, and about $20 a T-shirt. We'll sign them for you later. I think we've got a signing session down some other part of the hotel. It's a massive hotel, isn't it? Yeah. But yeah, so we'll do that later on for you.
So hopefully, and without further ado,
Thank you.
Kind of got it working, so we'll just go with it as it is. All it is the input signal isn't loud enough, and somebody just needs to turn the fader up.
All right.
But, you know.
Is that what you need?
Yeah, just there's an input signal.
Musicians. Jeez.
Honestly, don't become a musician. So we're just going to try and get a level, seeing we've got an audio guy here. Just a minute, we'll just try. This is from last night, so pretend you haven't seen this. So we just need that level that's coming out to you to be louder. There we go. So give that man at the back a big round of applause. Right, so here we are. This is Rareware. This is where we started our career so many years ago. So how we're going to run this, we're going to talk about the music side of things first, just in case anybody hasn't heard this before, and then we'll pass it over to Kevin, and he can fill you in with all the graphics. And
This is the golden toilet roll, by the way, my logo.
So many decades ago, in the last millennium, I used to work at this little music shop here called Coles. Well, it was called Coles Sound then. It's called something else now. In fact, it's a hairdresser's now, and a Chinese restaurant, and some other things as well. And you can get those kind of smoky things there. So it's not a music shop anymore. I'm going to try and get the marker thing working. It wasn't very happy. 2 seconds, and it still is not very happy. Yeah, there we go. Hold on. No, it's just not happy at all. So anyway, when I worked at this music shop, this is what started my career. I used to work in the drum section, and these people from Yamaha turned up with a music computer called a CX5 computer, which I will show you in a few minutes, and nobody knew how to use it. And they very kindly offered to anybody who learnt how to use this music computer an extra day off a week. Now, when you're 18, that extra day off a week is really important because you've got more time to get over your hangover. So I thought I'd go for that. And at the same time, I was also playing in an 80s band. So well, it was something awful, and we kind of looked like the typical. Let me get rid of that. 80s band, which was rather unfortunate, and also in that vein as well. This is what I looked like. As you can see, nothing's changed. So moving on swiftly, there we go. Now this is when I first started working at Rare. So that's yours truly in the middle, with the hair that is no longer there. But this young man on the right here.
The reason that I'm looking down at the floor is we had some security guards in the form of German Shepherd Alsatian dogs, and there was a bit of a minefield out there on the grass, and so I was being careful where I was standing because you never know what you were going to stand in. And the guy was, "Can you all move out a bit? Can you all?" And I think I just trod in something, and I looked down, and he sort of snapshot, and there you go. So, interesting fact there.
So yes, so this picture here is the Yamaha CX5 that I was very graciously given to have the extra day off a week with. And in there was an FM chip. Has anybody used FM? Yeah. There we go. In fact, just out of curiosity, how many composers and musicians do we have here? That's quite a lot, isn't it? So this was really old school, and it had a MIDI port, and it was the first computer that had a MIDI port attached, apparently. So I learned how to use the thing in my days at Rare, and I connected it up, and we did lots of 80s songs like We Close Our Eyes and Duran Duran and other bands like that. And so whilst I was there, we took all this equipment home, and or at least the guy from Rare that they'd bought from me in the music shop, and I'll just go through it. Should go through it now. So that was my first sequencer, which was a Korg. And yes, and that was my first keyboard, which also was a Korg Poly 800. Then I had a Juno Alpha. So this Juno was all the samples, all the synth samples in DKC and DKC2, going back, many decades ago. That they were all derived from this little keyboard here. And that was my drum machine, the R8. So when I started working at Rare, my first 3 weeks was spent playing Super Mario Brothers. I wasn't really a gamer at that point, but they said, all we want you to do is play Super Mario Brothers. And I thought, this isn't working. This is having fun. So 3 weeks of it, and they said, all this equipment that I've just shown you, they said, go into your room and just create a nice soundtrack for video games. So I thought, yeah, I can do that. And of course, as a very young, aspiring musician, you have all these great ideas. So I went away, put my headphones on, and came out with something that sounded, hopefully if it's working, something like this. Dreams. You can just imagine being on stage. It's Toto. They're a huge influence. But the reality of an 8-bit video game system soon came home to roost, because it sounded no better than a doorbell. In fact, probably not even that good. So this is an emulation of the NES, and these are the sort of sounds it actually sounded like, rather than my envisaged sound. And this is what I had to do. The Yamaha, sorry, I'm going to stand up because I can't see it. The Yamaha had MIDI, which meant I could play my keyboard. But there was no such joy with the NES. You just had code like this. The first number is the actual pitch of the note, and the 08 there is the actual length of the note. And that was as good as we got, really. And everything had to be typed. There was no MIDI. In fact, there was no MIDI on the Super NES, but that's for a different reason. We'll come to that in a few minutes. So I'll just run with this. And so you'd produce reams and reams of paper, reams of code, and it still sounded dreadful by the time you'd done all of that. And this was me at my computer, typing in all of that code. I preferred the other picture that was done in the studio. That was done at home. That was probably anger, gritted teeth. Now, the one good thing about this is that I did actually learn the importance of only having 4 channels. We had 2 channels that sounded really bad, and then we had a third channel that sounded like a wood, probably an owl really, on heat. And this noise channel, which just went or didn't really sound very good at all. And what does that sound like in motion, really? It sounds like this. It's very retro. This is for a skiing game, which is why there's a big mountain there with snow on it. And so for me, this was my very first video game that I ever worked on. It wasn't a big hit, but it was the start of things to come. Now, one of the good things I learned about that is that if I listen to all of the other Japanese composers who were doing these amazing soundtracks, things like Castlevania, that kind of stuff, you put it on and you think, my music doesn't sound very good at all by comparison. And the one thing I did learn is that music is basically movement. It needs to flow, it needs to go somewhere. So after several years and lots of programming, I actually managed to get it to sound a lot better like this. Well, I thought it sounded better. So Kevin has just very kindly informed me that the character that we saw running around, this one here he is, that is Kev's character.
Three colours.
So, again, another simple thing we learned there for doing video game music is that melodies need to be really simple, because if you try and do a complicated one, it's lost on everyone. But all the little fancy details in the background, they can be as complicated as you like. You need to make it try and sound pretty, that's the idea. And all of those things we learnt on the NES rolled over to this thing here, which is the Super NES. And I had great ideas for the Super NES because they came along and they said, look, it's got samples. And I thought, oh, that's amazing, samples, lots of samples. So I had this idea that I could sample my sound card, and I also had lots of other ideas as well that I'd, maybe sample some guitars as well, maybe even my drum kit and a synth. In fact, I could sample anything, but what they didn't tell me was that you could sample or have as much sample memory as you want, but there's only 64K, which is tiny. It's not very good. And also they said, and we're going to use 32K of that for the graphics. So we had to be really, really, really smart with the amount of memory used. So it wasn't a case of sampling everything in the kitchen sink, because that is 1 second of CD sample quality music. Okay? And this is 64K. And I played it 5 times because I found it unbelievable as well. So I had to write a whole game soundtrack with that much memory. So things were going to have to be slightly different. We had to go around things in slightly different ways. So the way I did it was to take a big sample, like this one here. You've heard that sound before, probably. And so you could use a fraction of it, so that one in the middle, but then you had to get even tighter. And that is 1 single cycle of a waveform. And when you start putting those single cycle buzzers together and start moving through it, then you start getting sounds like this. And this is the wave station. So it sounds quite nice because the sound's always moving. It's always different. And here's the other one. So just using that analogy, I managed to make aquatic ambience. That was my first kind of test bed, really. And you can hear the bass just stepping through waves, really simple. But it took me 5 weeks over Christmas to work it out, and I wanted to do it in secret because it was one of those things that was going to take a lot of time, and people normally wanted things 3 weeks ago. So I worked all the way over at one Christmas, got it working, and fortunately they seemed to like it, and I got the job writing the music for Super Donkey Kong. So Kev's going to give you his side of things with the graphics very soon, but the other thing I wanted to show you is, and again you're going to have to listen very, very carefully for this, is what we've been working on recently. Sorry about that, I didn't need to go back there. That's it. Okay, this is it's a game called, it's for Playtonic, it's called Yooka Laylee, and obviously it features the instrument the ukulele. That's good, that. So Kev has done some of the characters for it, and this is probably the latest release, is the Impossible Lair, isn't it? So listen very carefully, it's not very loud.
That's quiet.
It's very quiet, isn't it?
How many of you have heard of the game? Or do you know, you're aware of Yooka Laylee, yeah? Have any of you played the new game? Like, if you haven't, you need to go out and try it, because if you're like a fan of Donkey Kong Country, you're going to love this. So, yeah, I urge you to try that now.
Right, just a minute, I might have your thing over here. Just give me 2 seconds. Sorry, we're just debating whether to swap the HDMI cable over or just try and find the file on here.
Is that the end of the audio extravaganza?
Art now, absolutely.
Okay.
And it might be
Let's just have a little round of applause for David. He gets very stressed. Okay, we don't know if you're going to actually see any graphics now, so you just have to imagine fantastic artwork. Come on.
Do we have any tech guys at the back who are good with HDMI?
We've just got an iPad Pro and an HDMI cable going into that feed there. If not, then we can get it on here.
Have you got your stick?
Let's just put it here.
Okay, let's try.
I hope it's on. If not, I'm just going to have to walk around with its iPad.
Okay, do you want to put the, which one is it? Right there. Right, let's try it. As you can see, we're running a very slick operation here.
But this is how games are made. Once again.
Right, I'll just get rid of the other program. That might help.
It's not working at all.
Okay.
That's odd.
Right, where's your presentation? Any screens? No? No, it's Just do that, okay? Sorry? Yeah.
I'm going to stand up now. I'm feeding back, but never mind. Okay, so my name's Kevin Bayliss, and I'm going to try and do this really quickly because Dave took up loads of time. Okay, where did it all start? It started with handheld computer games. I'm going to sit down again because I can't read it. Obviously, all of the stuff that you used to get in the 80s moved on to arcade machines, the home computer. I convinced my parents that it was the best thing to do for school and playing computer games on. And at school, I didn't know really what I wanted to do. I just wanted to get into the games industry. And my careers officer was terrible because there wasn't really an industry as such at that time.
We've got an extra 10 minutes, by the way.
And, oh, it's cool. We've got an extra 10 minutes. I'm just going to have a little doze. So, yeah, I didn't really know what to do, so I went to college to do a little bit more education with computer studies. And then one day while I was at college, I saw an advertisement in a local paper. And this was a company called Rare. And I got a call from Tim Stamper, and he said, would you like to come? And I'd got a few demo tapes put together on my Commodore 64, and my parents dropped me off because I was only young. I was only about 16 at the time. And so they dropped me off there when they went to go and visit my grandparents and left me there. And cut a long story short, Tim Stamper came out and he introduced himself and said, this is what we used to be. We used to be a company called Ultimate Play the Game. And they were based in a small village in Warwickshire in England called Twycross. And Twycross is pretty much unknown apart from the zoo, which it's very famous for, and its monkeys, which was quite appropriate really for us. And as you can see, there's me doing my first few tasks at Rare at the zoo. Now everybody thought that I worked at the zoo, and so apart from the church and the tractor's place and the village hall, there was not a lot going on in Twycross, and so they assumed that's where I worked. But it wasn't. It was Ultimate Play the Game. And they were really like class leaders of video games in the UK and I guess in Europe for the ZX Spectrum in particular. And these are just some of the titles that these guys put together. I'm going to whiz through a little bit quickly now so I can sort of relax a little bit more. Is everybody getting all this? I'm not rambling too much, no? No? Cool. Okay, so as you see what I did there, happiness, get a little bit of a plug-in for the NES, because that was the first machine that I was given to work on. And I came in, and Tim showed me how to put the graphics together. And to begin with, they put me on some early titles, and there were things like Hollywood Squares, Wheel of Fortune, and I was given sort of mundane tasks of putting together prizes and, you know, a fitted kitchen or a picture of a Porsche and stuff like that. And he showed me how to put those together. And then we wanted to move on from doing these license projects and actually get something that the company owned themselves and push out there as a brand. Something might have been a bit of a rip-off of the Turtles, but it wasn't. It wasn't at all. No, actually, when I was a kid, I was really into nature, and I used to sit in my back garden and look at frogs and toads and stuff. And so Tim, as you can see on there, he asked me what to come up with. So I drew some characters, and every time I draw a character, I draw these pointy eyes. And it's the only thing I can draw, really. And so I drew these 3 frogs, and I put them on a lily pad with nunchakas and stuff like that, and I called them the amphibians, but it didn't really go down too well. So Tim says, no, we'll call them the Battletoads, and another guy wrote the story, and then, yeah, the toads were born, and it's fantastic, because they're out to this day, and they're like 30 years old now, so I never thought they'd even get off the ground, but really quite proud of those guys. And so, this is how we would have put the graphics together. I'm popping a little bit. Can you? Is there something we've got for this? Anyway, so yeah, it was a very limited system. You'd got sort of 3 colours on there, 4 palettes to choose from, 3 colours and a transparency for anything that moved around, and so you had to draw all of your frames of animation, and everything had to be condensed into as few frames as possible and as little size as possible. So, I haven't got my glasses on, so I can't actually see what frame I'm looking at anymore. But, oh look, there's a salamander. Where's that come from? It's as if there's going to be a game or something. So there, Salamander's character. We'll talk about those a little bit later on. But yeah, so you draw your character first, and you'd stick it on a huge desk. I used to sit on this great big sort of draftsman's desk, and it was full of fluorescent tubes. And it would be burning away on my face all day, and I'd be lying on this thing. I had a fantastic tan by Friday every week, and it used to send me to sleep. But you'd have a grid, and you had to put the grid paper over the top of your image, and each grid section was made up of 8 by 8 pixels, and you had to then box off your 8 by 8 pixels into squares of 8 by 8, and they were called sprites. Put all those together, and that's how you made your graphics. So you'd put some sellotape over the top, a piece of tracing paper, and you had to make sure that your size was correct to get it into the sort of space and region that you needed it to be. And then you get a pencil, and you just sort of trace around the image and get the silhouette right. And so once you'd got that, you'd start tweaking it a little bit and say, well, this is probably going to fit into 8 by 8 here and here. And so you'd sort of work from that. Once you got the shape together, you then get some magic marker pens, and you start drawing along over the image. And of course, you've only got 3 colours. And the other colour, which is a transparent colour, would be just a wasted colour, really. Everyone said you got 4 colours for any square on a background, but on anything that moved, it was 3 colours and transparency. So you were quite limited. So if you wanted the whites of the eyes, you had to put another layer over the top and add extra detail. So if you got a character that wore any kind of costume, and it was specifically needed to be a certain amount of colours, it would take away your skin colour and everything. So everything would look a bit muddy with 3 colours, and so you'd end up overlying new sprites. But the problem was, this in particular, this character was a good example because it's very, very long. If you had 8 of these square boxes that you would position over your character, which I'll show you now, in a line, one of them would always disappear. It only could draw so many in a line horizontally. So the NES was absolutely fantastic for vertical scrolling shoot-'em-up games, but it wasn't good for any characters. Once they came in line, if you look at a game like Salamander or Nemesis or any of the horizontal shooting games, you'll see things flicker on and off as you're moving through. So yeah, the problem is it wasn't like today where you've got a nice editor, and every time you make a mistake you can say undo. You can go back in time essentially and go forwards and try this and that. Once you put your piece of ink down on that paper, it's there, and you can't rub ink out. So we were given these scalpel blades, these surgical scalpel blades, to erase your mistakes with, and you would just sort of scrape away. And this is usually what my desk would look like. And Mark would always say to me, why have you got red on there? There isn't any red on this character. And so once you've done all of this, and I'll mention Squinty Face there. If you can imagine, this is on my desk, and I'm sitting up close to it. You can't actually envision what it's going to look like when it's on a tiny TV screen. So you'd be sitting there like this, and you'd do this, and I don't know why I would turn my head, because the monitor is always straight, but it was just a habit we got. So you had a bad neck, sunburn, squinty face, and cut fingers. So it was actually a very dangerous job. We weren't paid very much. So yeah, that's where we got with that, and you have to convince the software engineer that it would look all right, it'd be okay, it'd be all right, Mark, don't hit me. So you then have to position these sprites, which I told you about. So I'm pointing at the screen here, but you can't see my finger. But if you can see on there, you'd have to, in a similar way to how Dave was explaining with his hexadecimal technical data stuff with his music, we had to do a similar thing with each one of these boxes would have a code in hexadecimal to represent how the colors and how the pixels were turned on and off. And then you had to also work out where they would all be positioned based around an origin, which would be down here by the number 8. And so you take that, you take it upstairs and you put it on a disc. It was about 3 flights of stairs in this old farmhouse, and you'd sit there with Mark or Steve or whoever I was working with, because I was sometimes on 2 or 3 games at once, doing all of these sprites, being underpaid. And then we'd look at them and like the tail would be coming out of his head or something, and I'd have worked something out really badly, and so they'd lose patience with you really quickly. And then you'd see these 3 sprites in a line here, these going on the tail. Sometimes you're getting these overlays where you've got one box crossing into another. If you did that too often, you were wasting memory really, because you got the same bit of data twice. And often Mark would, you see those gills that's coming out the back of his or her face there, he would just chop that off and say, don't need that, we don't need that. And so half the things that we drew, you would get butchered and you wouldn't see it in the game anyway. So anyway, on from that stage, Chris Stamper was an absolute wizard with electronics, and he put together his own arcade machine, and we used this to also support an in-house editor that we wrote. So if any of you, Dave asked a question with the audio guys, any artists in here today? Any digital artists, any old school artists? Oh, there's quite a few of you really. There isn't. But stand up all the artists. Come on, I'll stand up too. That is some of you. Give a round of applause to the artists. We're underpaid. We're underpaid. Okay, sit down now. So, yeah, no more squinty face, because now you've got an undo button, you've got a mouse, and what we did, we draw the picture, and rather than it being on a big board, we put it to the photocopier, and the camcorder, because it was the digital age, would take a picture of it, send it to there, and we'd have a little editor that we wrote, and we'd sort of jot that up. No decoding, just put it on a disc, take it upstairs, and it went in the game as you wanted it to look. But the next era, Tim was messing around with some magazines and some brochures on his desk, and he was looking at stuff like, has anyone seen the movie The Abyss? Did that look fantastic or what? And he was looking at this on his desk, and I said, what are you doing with this? And I think this is the way forward. And I thought, how are we going to do this on, I think we were still on the NES at that time. And we were just moving on, and I said, it's impossible, we can't do this stuff. And so he bought a machine, and I just started playing with it, and he bought one for himself and started playing with it upstairs. And I did actually try and get something done with that technology, and so I built a 3D model of a ball and tried to give it a very few amount of frames. And you can see on these balls there it had a checker texture, so it only had to rotate a small amount before it looked like it was rotating. And we just scaled those up on the Battletoads coin op and made them come towards you, and so they looked like they were rotating. And then there with the ship, I think I had like 3 or 4 frames of it tilting and rocking, and when you watch the game, for a game of its time, it looked like a digitized model moving, but it was actually a CG generated graphic from using this software that was called Power Animator, which is now called Maya, and it's like an industry standard piece of software. It's amazing. So yeah, I always wanted to do a fighting game because I was a bit of a ninja when I was at school. But when I wasn't looking at frogs, I was looking at Bruce Lee. And I just wanted to make a fighting game, but nobody wanted to do one. I did loads of concepts for them, 3D ones, isometric ones. And so, of course, the first thing I started doing was building characters made out of real, because compared with the software that we've got today, although Power Animator was fantastic, it was very limited and it was quite slow. And so when all your characters moved, they were sort of made up of ball joints because there wasn't any organic skinning or anything like that available. And of course, the thing that it did really well was natural phenomena, and it could produce reflections and make effects like ice and water really well. So, well, I'm going to do a set of characters that take advantage of that. So we had Fireman and Iceman and Rockman, and most of the characters were going to be like robotic-looking characters and with a human head maybe stuck on there. And so this game actually, as any of you know, Killer Instinct, this is the game it sort of evolved into. And we also were able to experiment with motion capture. And I had a motion capture suit, which I would get in and perform a lot of the, well, pretty much all of the moves. I'd stand in high heels and walk around to become Orchid, because it was the only way I could walk with a sexy walk. And so, yeah, that's how Killer Instinct was born. But at the same time, you can see there, I'm rambling too much now, but Nintendo came over to see us, and they wanted to combat Aladdin, which was coming out from Sega. They wanted something that looked fantastic, and they saw the demo that we were doing with Killer Instinct, and they says, "Can you do something with that, please?" And so, I'm sorry, but my font got screwed up here. Tim came in and showed me the facts that was come from Nintendo and says, "Look, Kev, they want you to redesign Donkey Kong. He's not been used in any games for a long time, and say, so could you do this? Do you want to do this?" I said, "Yeah, I'll do that." And so what I did was make a very sort of compact looking, still thinking in the days of too many sprites per line, so I kind of limited him a little bit and made him very square. But this is actually the first concept that I did for the character, and this is how he actually turned up in the game. And obviously he's evolved a little bit since those days. He's a little bit more refined now, a little bit cooler looking, but this is essentially the model. And also I got the chance to come up with Diddy, who was Donkey Kong's sidekick, because he had a few extra features there with his tail. So yeah, it was a fantastic opportunity, so I'm really appreciative of being able to do that. And then we went from the rendered graphics, which were essentially still sprites, but it was like a picture taken of my 3D models, into real 3D, where we moved on to the N64, and everything was just made out of triangles. And it was a time when I actually managed to do a racing game, which was also the genre that I really, really love as alongside fighting games. And so we had a fantastic time working on this game. It was a nice, colourful game to work on.
Just out of curiosity, has anyone ever heard of Diddy Kong Racing?
What's your favourite tune on that game? Well, this guy did all of the music for that, so come on. Also, it was actually called originally Pro-Am 64, and my first start sequence on the game, I was explaining to somebody the other day, rather than having Diddy coming around the N64 logo, it was actually Timber the Tiger running around the racetrack that they all appear on, and he was controlling a little radio control car with a mini version of him, so they were all going to be like RC Pro-Am, which was the game that we did on the NES. But Nintendo looked at that and they said, we need a game out now, because Banjo-Kazooie was a bit late, unfortunately, and so we were very pleased on our team, because we had it pretty much ready and it was out there, and yeah, it did really well, so I'm really pleased with that team. The team worked very hard in a very hot summer. And then I moved on from that game, I moved on to Star Fox Adventures. Another thing I'll just mention, I have to apologise in advance, is we did a lot of the voice acting in-house at Rare ourselves. So this guy here, this is Tricky. And that's my terrible, awful American accent, apologies there. And there's Whizpig. I think I made somebody cry. I was talking to somebody the other day and he says, you made me cry. It's a little worm. Glacius, to do the voice for Glacius for Killer Instinct, I had a mouthful of yogurt. And Jago, well, I come from the Midlands in the UK, and if you come from Birmingham in the UK, everyone calls you a brummie, and every time I did all of the Indakyoken and stuff like that to begin with, it was all kia, kia, but I just sounded like a brummie ninja, which is not cool, and so we had to just change the way everything sounded a little bit. But yeah, voice acting, and as I say, like on there, Star Fox Adventures is quite a cinematic game. It had a lot of cutscenes, so it was a fun one to work on.
It's about 2 minutes.
2 minutes left. Okay, I went on from that, and I went on to Perfect Art Zero, and I had to do the promotional art for that. and then I moved, onto Perfect Dark, and then onto Perfect Dark Zero. And that was the last game I worked on at Rare, because I'd been at Rare quite a long time and I needed a break from the industry, really. So I got to the point with Perfect Dark that I was able to move off from that. So I disappeared to a career in music. Look at this guy in the middle.
So,
only taken 2 years ago.
I'm just going to interject there and say that for anybody who didn't catch us last night in the main ballroom, we will be playing at the Belvedere Bar, 7:30, and not only will we be playing a few numbers from DKC and other games, but me and Kev, and also Grant as well for a while, we played in this band called Madison, which was a covers band, and some of those covers influenced heavily some of the soundtracks that you may have heard over the years. So as well as playing some video game music, we're all going to be playing a few covers as well, because Kev is actually a fab singer. So
that's absolutely correct. No, actually I'm not. But I'll just quickly get in arse. You must Google A.R.S.E. That was all Rare Star Entertainers.
Indeed.
That was a collection of all of the musicians at Rare, and we used to get on stage at the Christmas parties and just make a noise, and that was pretty fantastic. So yeah, we've already been over Yooka Laylee, so sorry, I'm gonna have to skip through this pretty quick, but buy Yooka Laylee, and then buy Yooka Laylee and Impossible Lair, okay? It's there, buy it, it's fab. What's this? What's this, Dave?
it's my t-shirt.
Salamandos! Okay. Salamandos is a new project that Dave and I are working on. It's a nod to our 30 years in video games industry. We love it. We love video games so much, and we love developing them. And so we said we're going to do something that is ours, really, and we got it to keep, unless somebody wants to pay us a lot of money and buy from us. But yeah, maybe it'll be an ebook. Well, it will be an ebook.
It's going to be an ebook. It's definitely going to be an album.
Maybe it'll be a game.
Yeah.
I mean, we both work at games companies, and we're quite well connected. So maybe we'll do that. But it's very early stages at the moment. So we just performed a song from it. But if I tried to explain what War of the Worlds was with somebody the other night from the 70s, a musical album, and they were just wait. He said, I think my dad said something about that once. And the guy I was talking to was like 30. So yeah, we'll have to explain that visually, and so the way to explain it visually, I think, is with an ebook. So it'll be an ebook with amazing music and a fantastic story and a lot of characters, and then we're going to push it from there, and we'll see what happens. But if you check out our site, you'll be able to see any sort of developments with that. So come and see us, and we'll tell you any information on that. But yeah, if you liked everything we've done in the past, it's going to be more of the same, but better.
Yeah. So we'd like to say thank you very much for coming along and listening to our talk. And
apologies for the rush.
And also, if anybody's got any questions, please fire away. Sir. No, we're not. No, the new Battletoads is being developed by Microsoft on Delilah Studios, I believe, and they're doing it. So we're nothing to do with that.
Did you guys do the voice of Pig Monkey Star Fox 64?
Did we do the voices too?
Somebody in...
64.
No, that was different studio altogether, so we didn't do that one.
What's your favorite piece you've ever done?
The most favourite piece I've ever done depends what mood I'm in and what day I wake up, but the Savannah tune that we did last night, I forget what it's called.
Guy over there with the black t-shirt with his hand up. Yes.
I always wondered, do you still have the demo, or remember what it sounded like that you showed to the right employees at Commission Hiring?
Of which game, sorry? The demo of?
When you got hired, when you showed the right employees at the music shop, when you showed them that demo.
You've got the demo that you first played to Tim and Chris when they came?
I don't have that demo, no. All I can say is that they listened to it and they turned to each other and said, monsters.
Yes.
They thought it sounded like monsters, and I said, is that good? Clearly it was.
This guy in the red t-shirt on the end here.
Yeah, when it comes to writing music, you started with pretty limited tool.
Sure.
Writing now about this stuff, would it be advisable to sort of limit yourself from what you is that
no, I think it's always good to do different exercises where you are limiting things to some degree, it might only be limiting to, say, only using 5 notes and seeing what you can do, and putting the chords behind it to change the feel of it from a major to a minor. That's a really good exercise. But to limit the technology, I'd say no. It's not very good for your head.
Somebody at the back there with the white top.
Hey,
Shout, you're going to have to shout. I'm deaf because I'm old and I sing this.
first of all, is this you guys' first MAGFest?
No, I came 3 years ago.
It's my first MAGFest. I'm a MAGFest virgin. So you pop my cherry. Okay.
I had a question for David in particular.
Go.
Fan of the original Donkey Kong Country game. I grew up with it. It's a huge part of my childhood. So the whole soundtrack is just a huge part of me growing up with video games. And I was just curious, what is your favorite piece of music from the first game that you worked on?
From the first game, DKC, probably Aquatic Ambience, because that was my test bed. It was the technology of getting the sounds to move from one waveform and crossfade into the next, and couldn't do it with MIDI, and you wouldn't have been able to. So the fact that we could do something different, even though we were limited, was quite satisfying. And even though it took a long time to program, because it was all hex code and 6502, I was very pleased that it actually worked out. So for me, that was just proving that the idea for using the tech worked.
Okay. I've seen this guy put his hand up a few times. Go on. Yes, guys.
Around the time of Diddy Kong Racing, what 3D modeling software were you using at the time?
That was Power Animator. It was still Power. I think it was changing over to Maya. We were actually doing a bit of beta testing with when they said we're going to do they were going to do a version of Power Animator, and they were going to do a version specifically for games called Maya. But it never happened. It kind of, I think there was going to be Inca and Maya or something, I can't remember, but there were going to be 2 pieces of software, but it just eventually evolved into Maya, and so that's what you've got today. This guy here,
By chance, the first part is, are you going to be coming to the autographs?
Yes, later, sorry, wherever it is, we go into the signing area later, so we can sign anything that you want.
Yeah, and just to shamelessly promote ourselves, we've got a few of these T-shirts if anybody wants one.
Yeah, very small number, and it's just concept art, so the way that the whole product is going to look is going to be slightly different to that, so these won't be available soon, so there's only a few of them. Let's face it, we just want to get rid of them, don't we, Dave?
So we've got them today. We're either at the signing or at the Belvedere bar later. We'll be there.
Lady in a pink rare cap. Look at that.
Did you design or did you model Dixie Kong?
No, that was a guy called Steve Mayles. I sit next to him every day. He sits with me. He did banjo and kazooie.
Why did you have such an oral fixation? Just constantly chewing gum or like eating honey or like...
Well, when was that game out? When was this game?
That was when we were doing Diddy Kong.
Yeah, I mean, if we was to do, I think this game here, what we're going to do is we're going to have a nod back to the 80s, and so there's going to be a few retro jokes about how female characters were perhaps perceived in the day, and so, you know, things have changed since then, so if any new characters come along, I don't think they're all going to have pink bows in their hair or anything, but, you know, unless you want pink bows in the hair. But no, I do like your outfit, by the way. It's very cool.
Yes, we're very impressed. So
I think we can squeeze one more question. Do you want to find someone?
This chap in the blue coat here.
Basically, like programming like music into like the NES and SNES. Was there any times when it was just too intimidating for you and you had to take a break?
Well, I had this problem yesterday because the Cubase, which is the program I use, they've changed their graphic engine for the video playback. So whilst it worked a couple of months ago, I forgot to check that the video was still working. You just assume it would, and it wasn't. And so I was having one of my little fits in my bedroom yesterday, trying to get the thing to work. And it's just they've changed the codec. But as soon as I'd found it, and there's about 20 different check boxes, and once you've got the right combination, then you could render the files out, and it plays in Cubase. But for about half an hour yesterday, I was very angry, and you know, it's technology is like that. Sometimes you just can't get the thing to work, and you've just got to go and break something.
How are we with? Have we got to get out of here? Is there somebody coming in? Because we can answer a few more questions if it's time.
We've got another 7 minutes. Then
7
we really
minutes.
have to stop.
Okay. Who's the orange hair?
I noticed that, I'm sure other people noticed that a bunch of the songs in the Donkey Kong Country series are inspired by other pieces of music, like Vangelis, for example. Snowbound Land.
Yeah.
I was wondering if the K. Rool Return song was inspired by the Hook soundtrack.
It was inspired by Prokofiev, which is where I got the idea from, and also the Rites of Spring, and I was listening to Tchaikovsky as well. So that's where I got it from, but yes, it does sound very similar, but I believe they might have got it from the same source, so it's a familiar used kind of thing, and I thought it was perfect for a bit of a sea shanty, so I borrowed it as well.
K. Rool here.
Actually, yeah, I really love K. Rool. Like, I was trying to figure out, when I was a kid, I was like, I love this character. What the heck is up with this guy? Like, what was the inspiration for the character?
This is another Steve Mayle special. Actually, the Kremlins, all of the characters, are actually earmarked for another game prior to that. It was Eddie Stobart. Wasn't
Yeah,
it?
absolutely. In the UK, we have this transit company or haulage company called Eddie Stobart, and for some reason we were heavily inspired because we used to see it on the side of trucks every day, and that's where the idea for Eddie Stobart came, and that's where.
So originally the Kremlins they were crocodile characters for that game, which I came up with, and then they went into DK because we needed a set of enemies that sort of worked, and Steve developed those and gave them more character and turned them into individual characters. So.
You really made Kilgore way too powerful. Love your names.
Cool.
Thank you. Cheers. We've got a gentleman here.
So this guy.
In the 90s, across the pond for you guys, there were studios across Canada that were doing 3D animated cartoons. They did stuff like Reboot, Transformers, Beast Wars, even the Crash Dummies. There was also one Donkey Kong.
I have, yeah. Well, when you remember when it was made, as I say, these pieces of software were a lot more limited at the time, and when there's a budget, everything that you had to buy on Maya, we were very lucky because Nintendo invested in it, and so we had every module in Maya would cost more and more and more. So for a small animation studio, it would cost them a lot of money to put together something that was going to look fantastic. So I have seen it, and yeah, when you look at it now, it looks pretty old. But to be honest, our models that were in game didn't look that great because when you shrink them down to a small size, all of the pixels and all of the joints, they move in together and it looks more organic. But when you saw the characters up close and you viewed them, some of them look really crude, but that's just down to the nature of the software. Yeah. Maybe they just had a beta team on that or something like that. 5 minutes left.
Oh,
over there's a guy with questions with a hand up. Yep.
Just one more of the technical limitations of working on the 3D models for Nintendo 64.
How many triangles or the limitations of the system? There weren't any. The main problem you got was frame rate. The more you were drawing, you needed to cull so much of the backgrounds, and you would come up with these BSP planes, which meant that if there was something that was a concave shape, you could turn it off if it wasn't going to be drawn. If you couldn't see it, we could keep turning things off. And there was all of these little bits of fancy code going on to try and make everything sort of work. But those little pieces of code, I think, also put a draw on the whole sort of machine. And so I think that our machine could only cope with a small number of triangles at a time, so often we'd have a different level of detail for each character. So for instance, in Diddy Kong Racing, the up-close character would be like 200 or 300 polygons, and then as soon as it moved away, I'd do a much cruder version of it at about 100, and then it go to 50, and I think when it got to a certain distance, it was like a triangle, like a prism with just a funny color on it. So it was limiting because we'd only got very small textures too, and we've been spoiled with all of this 3D Maya technology, and we could just render what we wanted and it looked very pretty, but then all of a sudden we had to go to make it things that look like they were made from egg boxes. So
2 minutes left. We've got 2 questions over here, and the chat behind you as well. So
Also do the voice of the shopkeeper and stuff on Adventures?
No, that was a guy called Steve Brand. Yeah.
My favorite character.
Basically, isn't it? Yeah.
So, Battletoads, Gremlins, Yooka Laylee, and now Salamanders. What is the lizard situation?
Well,
I think it's just this this love of amphibians and reptiles I had when I was a kid. It's never going to leave me. I had bearded dragons and geckos and stuff a few years ago. I don't have that now, I just have dogs. And as you saw there, let's have one little last tribute to my baby dude who died just before Christmas. Where is he? There you go, look. 18 years old. And we'll end with that R.I.P. dude. Thank you very much, everybody, for your questions.
Thank you very much for coming. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.